This is A Few Good Fights, proudly brought to you by the MMA Movement. I'm your host, Noel O'Keefe, and I am joined, as always, by Robert Palin and Sean Taylor. On this week's show, we have the big MMA news, and we are joined by Chuck Mindenhall. We look back at UFC 237, that slam and Rose's mindset, the return of Nate Diaz. We fight your corner, we educate young Sean, and we have Sean's weird and wonderful news. So this is the big MMA news, and I'm delighted to say we are now joined by the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. So Chuck, thanks for taking the time to come on to A Few Good Fights.
Been a little bit, guys. Glad to be back on.
A little bit in the new name.
Yeah.
So UFC 237 went down this weekend, and Jessica Andrade slams her way to the UFC strawweight title. Let's start there, Chuck. You wrote a great article that's up on MMA Fighting right now if people want to go after they listen to this to give that a read. What was your take on the fight, I suppose, first, and then obviously the fallout, everything that came with Rose post-fight?
Oh, man. I thought it was a brilliant fight, to be honest. You always like a fight where you have no idea how you got to where it ended from the way it played out. Like, the way that fight was playing out was so unique in the sense that Rose Namajunas going into enemy territory, I guess, a little bit. She has the crowd against her, but she's able to just dictate everything that's basically happening in that cage, including fending off the slam, the early slam, and stuff like that. And it puts her in an armbar situation when she does go down through the slam. So it was one of those situations you're watching her and you're thinking, why is she an underdog, or why are we sleeping on Rose Namajunas in this fight? And I for just a minute, I was like, this is going to be her moment where she kind of catapults, I think, into a different strata of star. And boom, that thing happens in the second round, and she gets knocked out, and all fortunes change. And then, of course, afterwards, she's basically confessing that she's not sure if she wants to continue to do this, how long she wants to do it, and everything else, leaving the whole thing up in the air. So a complete 180 from the way, within about a half an hour span, a complete 180 from where she seemed like she was headed to where it ended up. Crazy. Only in the fight game can something like that happen.
With Rose, from covering her and from watching her over the years, do you think that what she said after the fight is more so a product of last night or 2 nights ago, where she was in Brazil, she had all this weight on her shoulders, and now she's kind of coming out and saying, maybe I want to step away? Or do you feel like it's more of a thing that has built up over the years based on what you've seen?
I think it's built up over the years. She certainly has been she's wired differently than most fighters. Obviously, I don't think she really strays into the spotlight as much as some of the other fighters like to. I'm not sure she's as swayed by fight purses and maybe legacy talk like a lot of us like to talk about. She seems fairly reclusive, and of course she's had certain things that have happened in her life, including the way she was introduced, I think, to the UFC through the Tough franchise, and just being, dubbed the next Ronda Rousey, and just having those strange expectations. Because at the time, if you recall, everybody was waiting, who's going to be next Ronda Rousey? And I think she got kind of maybe prematurely and maybe unfairly pegged as that. And so starting from that, going through a couple of losses, the Carlos Esparza loss, I think just through that period of time, she became a different person. I always look back at when she stepped in to face Paige VanZant. She shows up with the shaved head and a really different demeanor. I felt like that was the first time we saw, or I truly saw, where she was talking about not wanting to be a beauty pageant, kind of wanting to be more about the fight, where you're just like, she's not going to be a typical star. If she's going to be a star, it's going to be people who are going to accept her on her own terms. But I think that her martial arts have continued to get better. She looks better and better each time we see her. But I never felt like she was fully, I don't know how to explain it. Like, she was never fully in the game like other people were in the game. So it wasn't surprising so much. I feel like she's kind of put down a little crumb trail to some of the stuff that, but how she's acted, what she said, that makes it so it wasn't a shock. So I think it's been built up over the years, to be honest. I think it's just one of those things that behind closed doors, when she's thinking about it, maybe she's not motivated in the exact same way that some of the other fighters are.
Yeah, I think to fall into that narrative as well, when you look at her post-fight after she beat Joanna, and she was all positivity, and while Joanna was trying to be the real bully in this fight, and I remember as well, even the lead up to it, the stare-off, she was reciting a prayer while on stage, and she does, I definitely buy into that narrative that she's just different from the norm. But I when we were leading into this fight, ridiculously, I picked Andrade, so I was right leading into it. But in a completely different way, I thought Andrade was going to be too strong, too powerful, too much of a bully. And in the fight, I just thought that Rose was looking phenomenal. She was looking like, as you said, I was thinking who's going to beat this girl?
Yeah.
And that's what I was looking at it in the first round. I was going, who is going to realistically come in here and beat this girl? And then I thought the adjustments that Andrade made for the second slam, because Dom in commentary had gone on about you can't slam somebody when you're in a single, but she just switched sides that the head is exposed, and then DC had called that she needed to let go. And again, the scary fact was when she hit the mat, Rose was out with a fractured neck previously. So there was a lot of concern there. When I was watching it, I was like, oh God, how bad is this? But then to speak so openly, it'd be interesting to see where her mindset is. And the reason as well that I picked Andrade was after the New York incident, she spoke so openly about how much that affected her, and sort of brought up the previous demons. So again, will this be something like, she's only young, Rose Namajunas, is this something that she'll go away from, take some time maybe away from the fight game, the weight of the title is gone, and maybe reassess?
I really think she should. She should probably go away a little bit for whatever amount of time she feels comfortable and, reassess her situation. I think she's only 26, right? Something like that? Yeah. 25, 26 years old. Very, very young in the fight game. But she's kind of grown up in it. And I feel like maybe she hasn't been able to grow as a person because she's been stunted into fighting and those expectations. I think she just has a lot of other things that she would like to try. She's so young, I'd almost encourage her to go do that. The one thing you don't want is somebody to burn out and lose a bunch of fights, and then it's irreparable, the kind of harm they do to themselves and to their legacy if it matters to her. And then they kind of come back a shell of themselves. I think she could come back just judging off of what we've been able to see from her, man, and still be a world beater in 2 years. I still think she's got that kind of talent. So if she doesn't come back, totally fine. Like I have no problem with people walking away from the fight game when they don't feel their heart is into it. So I would be okay with that. But if I'm her, I take the time to reassess. The weird one, we've seen a bunch of this recently, and Rory McDonald being another example of a guy who's kind of expressing maybe he's lost heart a little bit in the fight game, and then he's under a pressure situation to jump back in there right away. And I hope that that's the right move for him. But I can tell you why it feels all wrong is because in his head he needs to sort that sort of thing out too. So Rose is in a nice position where she can actually do that.
In the end, it seemed like it was a big win for Brazil with Andrade winning, just considering that all the legends previous lost.
If she didn't
it would have been horrible. But do you feel now the fact that like the first thing we spoke about is Rose, and the first thing that everybody's saying is the slam, was it illegal? We know it wasn't. But there's all these questions. Do you feel that's going to affect Andrade's title reign, at least at the beginning, if it goes on for longer? Do you feel like people are going to have them questions?
I don't think so, man. It's good that some of the other officials are weighing in. I feel like the air is clearing through every day that passes with it. It's one of those types of situations. I think that Andrade has been on a bit of a run. And the fact that it happened in her home country, it was a cool thing for her. You can't take anything away from that. And I have a feeling, whoever they book her, whatever happens in the next fight, I don't know if this will be completely in the past, but I think that people will be focused more on what's about to happen, to be honest.
With the slams, there is a great history of slams. Obviously, Rampage's famous one over in Pride. Then we have the likes of Matt Hughes and Newton getting knocked out. Just Newton. So there's many a case of great slams. But what's your feeling on slams in mixed martial arts, be it legal or legal? Away from that, what's your personal opinion on that type of slam?
Very tough because in the heat of a moment, obviously, you see somebody get hoisted in the air and then dropped on their neck or their head. There is nothing fun about that, because if there's ever, and I've thought about this a lot over the years, if there's ever going to be a chance of something catastrophic, I feel like it's going to come from a situation just like that, where somebody is dumped on their neck just right to paralyze them or whatever. We've seen it in collision sports like American football, things like that, where two guys collide and it's just a neck, it's a neck collision and somebody gets paralyzed. And I don't want to see that happen. But I will say that there's a lot going on in a slam. Obviously, there's a lot of it's a big part of the game, and I like it. It falls awfully close though. Like when they describe spikes and they describe those types of things, it kind of it becomes a big gray area right away, or it becomes very strict. I should say very strict in terms of was it coming on a curve? Was it going straight down? Those things are a little bit. crazy if we're examining him on that level, but as of right now, I wouldn't change it. But I will say that was the first high-profile one in a while where it makes you reconsider that. And I know a lot of people were really worried that maybe Rose was seriously hurt. I mean, they didn't show her right away. I was kind of worried, man. You see the celebration. Like, well, what about Rose? What is she doing? So I'm glad she was okay. But for the time being, man, I think that they stay in the game. They're infrequent enough, and they become a level of excitement enough. I would have a hard time just banning them based on something like that.
Yeah. Rob was starting to allude to there about almost being a terrible night for Brazil. Anderson Silva, 44 years of age. He spoke about afterwards that he sort of had a bad knee throughout camp. So at his stage in his career, for me, when I heard Anderson say that himself, I was like, why are you fighting then if you're coming in here as a limp dog? But, Michael Bisping called for his retirement after it. Again, we would always say we're not in a position to tell fighters when to call it a day. But realistically, Anderson Silva, 44 years of age. I don't think the extent of the injury has come out. But if we're looking at ACL damage or something like that, potentially that's the last we're going to see of Anderson Silva.
I think so. And this is why beforehand, this match, I don't know how you guys felt about it, but they make almost an arbitrary match here between a 44-year-old legend who's a former GOAT, this kind of guy, against somebody like Cannonier, who I feel like he's been around, people kind of know his name, but he's not really a caliber of anything where it makes sense. So there was no story. I saw Brett Okamoto did a piece on this. There was no real story to it. So for him to go out on this note, it's bizarrely anticlimactic. You feel like he should have had maybe a better fate. But honestly, if it is something that's a year-long process type of injury, man, he's already gone through so many different types of comebacks at 45 years old, and without any kind of boosting, synthetic help to basically heal faster or to do that stuff. I mean, it's just he's in a position where he's going to have to let his career speak for itself, man. I mean, the guy had a great career, and some of the stuff was regrettable down the stretch, but I'm kind of in the camp like if Anderson doesn't fight again, I'm totally cool with that, man. And I think he's done enough, and it seems like he's only kind of doing harm the further he goes. So I'd like to see him just take his losses and move on with his life at this point.
It's something we don't seem to do well in mixed martial arts, and that's have a fanfare or a farewell to the greats. Before looking at other fights, like you look at like BJ Penn, again 40 years of age. Nogueira, absolutely. Washed out at 42 years of age. This is a young man's sport, and is that illustrated by the three names I've just said here and the ages? It doesn't wait for you.
Luke Thomas done your colleague Luke, he done a post-fight show, and he was talking about this fight. He was talking about Anderson Silva, and one thing that he brought up, which really kind of, I was like, this is crazy, is that Anderson Silva's last kind of really convincing big win, aside from Derek Brunson, which was a little bit, it was a weird decision, and then Nick Diaz, which was overturned, was in 2012 against Stephan Bonner. 2012. That is insane.
That is very crazy, and I was thinking about that recently. I don't think I wrote about it before this fight. It was probably the last one, but I was talking about that very thing. How the last time he truly looked like Anderson Silva goes all that way back. He kind of had his flashes, obviously, early in the Weidman fight, but the first Weidman fight, and obviously that panned out the way it did, and it just seems like it's been a Hitchcockian spiral since then. It's just it's not been his game. I appreciate that he wants to keep going, because if you remember back in the day, the question when he was really at his best, going back to UFC 112, and he's fighting in Abu Dhabi and all those the weird fights that were kind of sprinkled in with the awesome fights. Yeah. He was always kind of threatening that he might leave at any time, that he could just retire. And I remember thinking, like, oh, my God, wouldn't that be a travesty if he just walked away from the game? It's crazy that you flash forward not quite a decade later, and he's hung around the game too long where we're having this kind of conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's tragic to see an end to a legend like that. And it's just, like we said, we don't tend to do the farewell story very well in mixed martial arts. Probably, I think, the biggest hit, though, for Brazil on the weekend had to be Jose Aldo. He looked like he'd almost shaken the recent defeats and looked back to being the Jose Aldo of best. You could argue the McGregor loss, although he came back to Frankie Edgar, that McGregor knockout really changed the world of Jose Aldo. But in his recent performances against Moicano and Jeremy Stephens, it looked like he was back to the old Jose Aldo. But yet on Saturday night, at first commentary we were talking about that he wasn't giving Volkanovski any tell on any of the feints, but then it just came to fruition that he just wasn't doing anything. It was like he was almost frozen in the moment. And Aldo, leading into this fight, spoke about, this is only 3 rounds, I'm used to going 5, I'll be more explosive, I'll be more aggressive, and we didn't see any of that. So I suppose my question is, why? What was different to Jose Aldo on Saturday that had gone previously?
It was very strange because we are used to seeing Aldo have moments of offense, like big moments of offense or big moments when he comes to life in a fight where you just see a turning point. I feel like the fight just kind of died in that anticipation. There was just a moment somewhere, maybe late second round. There was a couple of moments where I thought he was going to come on strong, and he just didn't. He just kind of kept his gun holstered. He didn't really go in there and do it. And I thought at that point, like, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to come to life in this fight. And, Volkanovski fought a very smart fight, and I think he was, technically sound. I think he kind of knew what he wanted to do, and I think he knew just enough to stay out of harm's way in the fight, and it was a smart play. He looked great, man, and this always seemed like maybe this could be a very difficult one, and it was like kudos to Aldo to hesitate, to not hesitate at all and say, like, yeah, I'll take on the guy who's, charging right towards the title. I'll take him on. But it just never – it kind of died in that anticipation where you wanted to see what happens when Volkanovski kind of gets in trouble himself. It just never happened. So not the greatest night, man. And, like you guys mentioned, I don't know how much Aldo has left, but I thought we might see a great version of him in this fight, just given his confidence and the momentum he'd rebuilt. So it was a little bit anticlimactic and a little bit, I guess, disappointing in the end.
The commentators seemed pretty confident that Volkanovski should get the next title fight against Max Holloway. Are you that confident, or would you look at someone like Edgar maybe getting ahead?
I mean, I feel bad for Frankie because he's been in line forever. But when you really look at it, man, I'm like, Volkanovski is going through Jose Aldo in Brazil and just doing that weird math thing where you're like, well, Frankie hasn't beaten Jose Aldo, and Frankie went 1-1 in the last year. He lost to Ortega, right? He lost to Ortega.
Yeah.
And then he beats Cub Swanson. I don't know. I wouldn't mind if they were like, we're giving Frankie his shot just based on all the times he should have had and he never did. I'd be okay with that. But I think if you're looking at it from the true meritocracy at this point and where we are, I think that Volkanovski is the guy to make. I think that it also presents just a pretty cool style matchup. And you got a guy from you got a guy from Australia versus a Hawaiian. I think that that's always cool for the global aspect of it and things like that. So I wouldn't mind seeing that, but if there is the plan, I would put it as a very close plan B. If that doesn't work, I have no problem with that. You're jumping in there.
You had one of the funniest tweets of the night when you said, it may not be completely obvious to the untrained eye, but I do feel Penn's lost a step. He's certainly lost.
I can't miss that.
Yeah, he's certainly lost a step, but what's your thoughts on BJ Penn and where he is, and do you think he's going to go again? Because we've come to this kind of discussion so much. Is he going to do it again? Is he going to retire? Like, the first couple of rounds didn't look terrible, but just didn't look like BJ Penn, and it wasn't fun.
It's not fun. I think that that's part of the thing, right? Like, the fighting should be at its, just like any sport or any form of entertainment, it's an escapist hatch, right? Like, you watch it, you want to get away from hard thinking. Every time I see that guy now, my immediate thought is you're kind of batting back a long-held feeling of like how tragic this thing continues to be. And I feel like that's not a fun pursuit. It's no longer fun to watch him. I agree with you. He looked better. It was a little surprising. I didn't know if it would be competitive or not. Clay Guida being a little bit obviously in his twilight and probably not, he's probably the right guy, but BJ's already lost to Seaver, He's already lost to a guy who basically wasn't going to punch him in the face in Hall. So I didn't anticipate there'd be any way that BJ would win this fight, but I guess I was a little surprised he competed and showed a little bit of that grit and patience and all that stuff. But I hope this is it. I mean, anytime you could say that, hey, my last win is in 2010, but yet I'm still in the UFC, It just reflects poorly on the organization in the end. If he wants to fight, the UFC has to basically they have to do the hard thing and say, like, well, you're going to have to do it elsewhere. Yeah. I think that's the move for the UFC at this point.
This was something it's part of the show that we do now. It's we call it Fight Your Corner, and Sean, who's off camera currently at the moment, will give us a topic that we'll be blind to and we won't know it, and you either have to argue pro or against the comment. And one of the questions at the time was, should the UFC as a promotion, or any promotion for that matter, have the best interest in the fighter at heart, and be able to say, look, it's time to hang the gloves up, or as you just said, you know, if you want to compete, it's not going to be with our promotion. And surely 7 fights on the skids, which is a record in the UFC, surely that's time that the UFC got to go, look, you know, BJ, it's time to move on, my friend.
And the truth is, man, they're burying him on like these prelims and everything else. What difference does it make at this point for them? He's not the draw he was either. And I think that even if he went to Golden Boy, or, you know, somebody like he goes to Bellator or whatever, how much can you get out of that at this point? I just think that BJ Penn, as sadly his legacy has sadly turned at this point, and he's hung on for so long that I'm just not even sure what the merit is for anybody to watch him fight. But of course, there will be a promotion out there if he wants to do it that would do it, that would put him in there. But we've seen Dana White kind of talk Chuck Liddell out of fighting again. We've seen him in select company, the guys who are kind of those boom period pioneers, and I feel like BJ is one of them. Dana White specifically should get involved and be like, I can't put you in there anymore, you know, and that's as simple as that. I know Dana's a little more hands off these days on those matters, but I would love to see him intervene, because he's been with, you know, BJ since they bought the company, when the Fertittas bought the company. It's been that long, so I think it's him who has to put the foot down at this point.
To beautifully segue, as you said, exciting with Bellator 221 went down as well, and Pitbull claims a controversial win over Michael Chandler. Firstly, what did you think of the stoppage, without even giving our opinions? What did you think yourself?
Yeah, see, I mean, it was complicated because when it first happens on live TV, I'm thinking, oh no, they just stopped the fight that it wasn't out, and now we're going to have a controversy, right? Which then it becomes. But when I watched it on the replay, I actually did see his hands. They're kind of on the canvas, and you just see them not doing anything. And just for a split second, it was almost reminiscent of the Fedor-Hendo fight, where he got hit, he was out, and then the next punch woke him up. It's what it looked like to me. So if you judge it just from that, like maybe the incoming punch kind of woke up his senses to defend himself at that moment, I think that's what happened. That's the way it looked like to me. You hate to see that stuff, but the referee, I believe, was actually acting off of what he saw in that split second. So it's very hard to fault him.
I agree completely. I think, like, when Pitbull landed the shot, it took it behind the ear. The equilibrium was gone. But as Pitbull throws, I think it's a left hand as he's on the camera, you can see Chandler look at him and avoids that. But then when he turns and goes belly down and lies flat for three punches,
4 shots,
he gives the referee no option. From the referee's perspective, he's seeing a fighter who's lying flat, not defending himself, taking shots. The fight's over. So I can see why the referee gave it up. And I'm sure if Chandler looks at it and is honest with himself, he can go, I can see why he stopped it.
Yeah. I think that's, you know, these guys are competitors, and Michael Chandler is a super competitive guy, and they have this bad blood with this, you know, this camp versus that camp. You hate to see it end in any kind of question like that, but ultimately, man, I don't really, in the end, when you just kind of add up exactly what you just talked about, if I'm a referee, I'm probably, you know, you're supposed to err to the side of caution. I'm doing the exact same thing. So I can't really fault anything like that. And I don't think anybody should take anything away from Pitbull, man. That guy, that's a hell of an accomplishment. He went in there and just pulled off. And to avenge his brother, I was just like, the fight game, you know, thrives when you have that kind of story. So it was awesome to see all that, and I'm willing to just accept it that it was a knockout and not have to look back, you know, in controversy at this point.
I did think it was cool. Michael Chandler did turn around and say, "Hey, who knew the little one hits harder?" I did think that was funny.
That's awesome.
Co-main event, no controversy needed. Douglas Lima ended Michael Venom Page. The first round was the sort of round you expected. I expected Lima to sort of look at Page, see what he offered. Page was doing what he does, very unorthodox style, striking, going sideways, stepping in, landing shots, engaged too closely. Lima got the takedown, and we went into the second round. Douglas Lima then timed that leg kick beautifully, and as Page was getting up, I don't even have a word to describe. It was like something from Mortal Kombat, where you just hear, finish him, and boom. And talking about shots that weren't needed, the two after, the taps after were not needed. But wow, Michael Venom Page was separated from his senses.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, I'll say this. Douglas Lima needed a moment. He needed something at some point in his career that would get him across. I feel like he's one of those guys who is so much better than the recognition he deserves. And I think sometimes there's a Bellator, there's a bit of the Bellator like kind of onus on him because he's been in Bellator the whole time. He's never fought in UFC, so people haven't seen him. There might be somewhat of the language barrier type thing, but whatever it is, he just has never got his fanfare. This fight, and I know we had a couple of good knockouts this weekend alone, but this fight to me, man, you see something that is that beautiful of a knockout, that deserves consideration for a knockout of the year. I think that's got to be in consideration, especially just considering exactly what you said. Watching him kick that leg and then just smoke him with that uppercut and then, deliver a couple shots. But the way he just gets up and walks away, like he knew it was coming himself. I love that. It was like the coolest. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in demeanor and comportment and just execution. I just thought the whole thing was awesome, man. And I hope this translates for him kind of going forward and people remember what a badass he is at this point.
Yeah, if you haven't seen MMA and this weekend was your first time seeing it, and between that fight and the Rose fight, and you've just seen like boxing, you'd be like, what is this stuff? This is mad. This is crazy.
What do we think of Michael Venom Page, though? Because I know a lot of people were saying he hasn't fought anyone legit. As soon as he comes up against somebody legitimate, this will happen. I think that's unfair about what Lima done, but also with Venom Page himself. This loss could be the making of him. Although a lot of people, I think, because of the build-up to him, think he's a lot younger than he actually is.
Yeah, he's 30, isn't he?
So he's 32, which is young, I suppose, still, but I think a lot of people think he's a young in his 20s fighter, but what do you think this does for Venom Page himself?
Well, I mean, at some point he had to get up there and fight these big boys, right? Like it had to happen at some point. Otherwise, I felt like they were just, I don't know what Bellator is doing if they're not going to make a fight like this at some point. So that was, massively compelling to me, even though I didn't think, I was at that Daly fight, the Daly Page fight, and it felt like it never happened. It was so inactive and so strange. The theater, I was in the Mohegan Sun, and it just kind of died in there, which I didn't think was possible for a Michael Page fight. So I was just hoping we'd see some good version of him, where he was going to give a good version of himself and actually get a fight out of Lima. Not something where he's going to get suffocated or put on the ground and kind of neutralize, but maybe where they would have crazy exchanges and we'd see kind of the best of both. And for him to get knocked out, there's no shame in it. But that's the one thing. It's his wheelhouse, right? If it's on the feet, it's supposed to be his world a little bit. And to see him get knocked out like that was pretty awesome. And I I think Lima too gets a lot of credit for doing it that way and not like some other way where he's chokes him out on the ground or something like that. So I was happy to see it, and I don't think it takes too much away from Page. I mean, you're always going to have these people like, oh, he's exposed, or this is what happens when he gets in there with a guy. But I'm like, I don't feel like it was really his choice. I think he would have fought guys like this years ago. But he just, this was his trajectory. He finally got it. He lost, big deal. There'll be other big fights. And if he really wants it, he'll get a chance to test himself again against a guy that people think he'll lose against. And who knows what happens on that one. So he's not that young, but I think that we will still see some big fights out of him.
I'm interested to see if that type of loss changes his approach. How he comes in, how he strikes, how he stands. Be interesting. Quick.
Sorry. Knew that sort of thing was going to backfire at some point, it inevitably has to, right?
Yeah, all the time. 100%. Yeah. One just quick shout out before we move on is AJ McKee. He's called out for a shot at one of Pitbull's titles. I like the way I say that. Just one of them.
Just one of them. Yeah.
But AJ McKee seems to be the fighter in Bellator that's really going under the radar and getting himself high up there in wins and against good opponents. Realistically, AJ McKee, is he a threat for a title in Bellator?
I think so, man. The guy has been that way, right? He grows up with a father who basically knew exactly how to put him in the right positions. And man, I think he just looks good. He's got the right charisma for the outside stuff. Like he's going to have the right, he's always going to be good on a microphone. I think he's got the right hunger for a guy who grew up around that and has been around some good guys. And like you just mentioned, he keeps showing well, and I would like to just see them. Like it's the same sort of thing. Bellator has a lot of these guys where they kind of they take them up a little slower than maybe you would find in the UFC. I feel like McKee has kind of proven all that stuff. It's time for him to probably get that shot.
It looked for a long time that it was going to be Gallagher and McKee. There was a lot of rivalry along that way, but you'd think with the Gallagher's loss that McKee is way ahead of him at this stage.
Never know what Bellator are like, and the UFC these days, because the momentums no longer have to match. Yeah. A lot of times they try to find the fight that will be most compelling, but to be honest, in either way, either one of those, I'd be okay with, but
A couple of matchups have been made for the UFC, and boy, are they tasty. We have got Tony Ferguson taking on Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Cowboy getting in there pretty fast after a 5-round fight with Ray Janal. I suppose my question, if Cowboy goes on and beats Tony Ferguson, everyone goes, genius, brilliant, what a man, you know, staying so active. Yeah, but is it too soon to be going in there after main event?
It is, man. I mean, you could slice it any way you want. He just fought 5 rounds. I know he dished out a lot more damage than he took in that fight, but that's a crazy undertaking to go fight Al Iaquinta and then turn around a month later and fight Tony Ferguson, whom I don't think too many fighters want to face. It's just one of those guys who always just pressure-oriented fighter who's going to, no matter what, he's going to put some damage on you. You would think the Cowboy, in that sense, I'm guessing that they threw a lot of money at him. There's probably some major incentive for him to turn around and do this, but tough, man. That is a tough matchup. The only thing I will say is that if he feels like he's at the best of his game right now, and he just really believes like he's invincible at this moment, he's a father, and I know he's kind of channeling this weird sort of protective energy. Or say, I don't know, he's finding this defiance like kind of later in life, after we were kind of eulogizing him a little bit when he lost like three out of 4 recently or whatever that was. For him to be back, maybe he's just looking on cashing as much as he can to get out. I don't know. But the bottom line is, that's a tough ask what he's about to do. I admire it. I appreciate that he wants to do it, but that doesn't. If I had to kind of put chances on that, I don't really like Cowboys' chances of going in there and beating Tony Ferguson under these circumstances.
I think a lot of people say the same for Tony Ferguson as well. We know that he has issues outside the octagon, and I don't think anybody can say for a fact if they're past or they're not, because we don't know. Yeah. But when I saw it reported and when I saw everybody's tweets, a lot of people were like, this seems like it's too soon. And again, we don't know, but to you, Noel, and to you, Chuck, does it feel too soon for Tony Ferguson based on what Dana White just said? Like, I think it was like a couple of weeks ago, he said, he's not ready to go.
I think the last time I was talking to you guys, we were talking about how strange he was going through this, right? Yeah. I think that was the last time I was on here. But it does seem a little bit quick considering we didn't really hear an official clearance. It was just suddenly he was on Twitter 1 week and the next he's got a fight. And it's the one coming right up, the pay-per-view coming right up. So this all seems very quick. I don't know about the timing contractually, like kind of like if these guys have to have something fulfilled before then or whatever it is, but it seems very quick. And I will say that maybe that's the one thing in the Cerrone corner that you could look at is be like, we don't know 100% if Ferguson is the same Ferguson we saw. I mean, the guy has been in there once every year for the last few years. So he looks the same in everything we've seen, but obviously it's been a bit. And him going through some of that scary stuff, which you're not sure, it's all very gray area as to what really is going on with him. It could be one of those situations where, he's impatient. He wants to get in there and the UFC is accommodating him. I hope that's not the case. I hope it all checks out. You got to just trust the people who are overseeing the process and the officials in this case, and hope he's the same Ferguson.
People around him, people close to him as well, need to be making sure that's right. But you never know. This could be the type of a lot of fighters, and we'll talk about this is what keeps them sane, is the regiment of training and leading into camp. That could be what keeps you stable and on the correct path. Another fight that was matched was Nate Diaz against Anthony Pettis, Showtime Pettis. So we've got Nate Diaz back. Will he step in the octagon though?
That's a good question. I was going to say that. I was like, we put the asterisk on it because we never 100% know what's happening. I wouldn't be surprised in 2 weeks if Diaz posts that he never agreed to the fight or something like that. Seemed to go, but weirdly, this is a fight I wanted to see a long time ago. Like I wanted to see these guys go at it when they were. I think this is going to be a welterweight, right? But you wanted to see it back in the day at lightweight, but that was years ago. And ultimately it's okay. I still dig it, but it's a weird one. I think of all the people that Diaz could have fought, this one wasn't the one that would have jumped into my top 5. But in the end, I'm happy if he comes back, man, and he's back in the fight game, and he's going to have. I've been wanting to see, because his last fight was that Conor McGregor fight at UFC 202. I've been waiting just to see what does his star power mean to a pay-per-view, or what does it mean? Does it translate? And we finally get the chance to figure this out, I hope. So I want to see how big of a star did he become through that process, or has he lost a lot of that mojo just because time has passed, McGregor's situation has passed, everything has moved on. Does he lose something? So it's more like my rooting stakes are more to figure out that. Like my interests lie more on that side of it at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think potentially the star power. I think like MMA fans will always watch Diaz brothers fight anyway. But I think the power from them McGregor fights, I think, may have dropped off. And I mean that the same way even McGregor. Like when I heard that Nate Diaz was matched, I was like, oh, I'm going to hear Conor McGregor next, because McGregor's been talking about a comeback. And all of a sudden, you look at every possible opponent that Conor McGregor could have had for a comeback. They all seem to be getting lined up to fight, so it doesn't bode well for the Irishman. The last bit we'll leave you with, news-wise, is Tom Duquesnoy announces his retirement for MMA. 25 years of age. Duquesnoy is a former BAMMA two-weight champion. I've watched Tom fight live, and I've thought I've just witnessed world class when I watched this guy fight. Yeah. Didn't really work out for him in the UFC. He didn't really get to showcase a lot of what he done in BAMMA coming up. He moved across to Wink John as well. He was working under Jackson Wink. But yeah, it's surprising news. We interviewed Tom, must be a year ago, 2 years ago, and he sort of, part of the interview, a lot of it was about outside of MMA, you know, what he likes doing, modelling, and he's very interested in fashion and all this the type of, I won't say nonsense, but you know what I mean, modelling and fashion, two things that I clearly know nothing about. But yeah, interesting. And at the same time, we're speaking about Rory McDonald and Anderson Silva and Rose, and we're saying they should go, they shouldn't go, and here we are, a 25-year-old, and yet we're questioning why he's going. So, you know, kudos to him and best of luck. But were you surprised with Duke and what?
A little bit. Only, you know, I hadn't really read too much on his outside pursuits, but I know one thing, man. When he was coming over to the UFC, I felt personally, I was like very excited to see what he'd be able to accomplish, and I thought he had the makings of a guy who could make major waves in the UFC. So at 25 years old, and he was something like 2-1. They weren't like these, and it was like a close split decision loss, right? Like against Stamen, I think. And so you look at those things and you think, like, it wasn't the worst showing. It just, I don't think he did enough to distinguish himself in those fights. For UFC fans, people who are UFC centric. But I certainly, it's kind of like what we were talking about with Aldo, and you're waiting for him to pull the trigger. I almost felt like we were kind of impending on him. Like, I was waiting for him to have that big moment where he would do something and kind of translate a little bit more and jump into that space where he would have like a high-profile fight on a higher-profile situation, and then we might be talking about him, you know, as we go forward. But it just never really happened. I guess on that level, 25 years old, man, it's surprising only because of the dude had that much potential to him. I feel like he could have done that. Politically
wise as well, it looks like MMA is going to become legal in France. Yeah. So if the UFC were going to visit, you know, he would have been the face for French MMA.
Yeah, he always came across as a really smart guy, though, didn't he? Like, he always had, like, remember when he was coming up in BAMMA, and like he didn't just jump into the UFC. He waited and he waited and he waited until he got the 2 titles. So maybe he's like just too smart for his own good. He just seen a different path and was like, this is way easier. I'm gonna go do this.
I appreciate that he basically said, you know, if I can't do this 100%, I don't want to do it. I don't want to insult the sport. I feel like more people should probably have that attitude. There are a lot of people who think that they can hold down full-time gigs, or that they can do these outside pursuits and still do MMA correctly. And I've seen so many people spread thin that you just see their careers go downhill as soon as that happens. So awesome of him to identify that, if that's really the case. If he knows his heart is really in other areas and not fighting, it's good to identify it before you take too much damage and hurt that pretty face. You know what I mean?
Very true. Very true. Nothing I have to worry about. Chuck, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we thank you for your time. And again, as I said, as we started, go and check out the article on MMAfighting.com right now, which Chuck wrote about Rose and the slam, and it's changed your perspective. But yeah, as I said, thanks a million again for your time on a few good fights.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Chuck. Thanks a million. UFC on ESPN Plus 10 goes down this weekend. It's headlined by Dos Anjos taking on Lee. Interesting main event. It is Lee's first berth at welter, Rob. So talk to us a little bit about what you expect to see here. Dos Anjos obviously coming off 2 big defeats to you know, the reigning champion and the fake champion, well, the interim
fake
champion Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman. So what do you see here for the Anjos? How important of a fight is this, and what do you expect to see from Lee at welter?
Well, obviously super important, but I do think the big question is what Lee is going to look like going up, because I think for a long time now, people have been saying Lee has a poor chin, or at least his chin is a little bit worn. And then on the flip side, I guess the defenders of Lee are saying, no, he just cuts too much weight, and that's what's really affecting him. So I'm very interested to see when he takes a punch, how he takes it, because we've seen Lee going on the old ice skates a few times when he's been hit. And you'd wonder if that's just the guys who he's fighting. They're obviously big punchers anyway. Or is it a weight cut, or is it his chin? I'd be very interested to see him getting hit by Dos Anjos, who, to be fair, Dos Anjos still has power at welterweight. He still has a lot of power at welterweight. Maybe not quite as much power against the bigger dudes at welterweight, but like these two are two former lightweights going up. RDA obviously has been up there for longer, so his body has had more time to develop there, and I think we've seen that over the fights. But I'm very interested to see how Lee looks in terms of the chin and in terms of the endurance and the durability.
It is the question that is asked, and a lot of times, and Dos Anjos is one of these people who was benefited from the lack of cutting weight. When he moved up to welterweight, he went on a bit of a tear. He had some really good wins. But then, as I said, he ran into Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman, and it's just... It's not a question of chin at that level, if you know what I mean. It's
as in
like their
him,
style of fighting, grappling,
tough fight for him.
Like bigger guys, bigger opponents. So that's where, and that was always going to be the question with Dos Anjos when he moved up, was fighting that type of fighter. Kevin Lee, I agree. Like he's a big guy. He always looked big. I know in the interim title fight with Ferguson, staff seemed to affect his gas tank, obviously, as it would do with what staff brings. But I think the weight cut is an issue for him. He's a big guy. I'm not too sure 100% what he stands at. I think he's like 6 foot. Maybe he's not. He's 5'9".
Thick, isn't he? Thick.
He's a big guy, yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what benefits come out of it for him. Will he have more cardio? Can he be more aggressive in his style of fighting? But fighting wise, what way do you expect Lee to see this? Because I know we always tend to say blueprint, but surely the last 2 RDA fights show you can beat him by just grappling like that. Yeah,
that was always the fear with RDA going, not even just going up, just in general, is that the guys who can wrestle him and who can keep him on the floor, even though he's great with his jiu-jitsu, he's not really a guy who's going to play off his back. He likes to stand up, he likes to strike, and if he gets on top, he's really good from there. But I know it's Khabib, but Khabib done a similar thing that his last 2 opponents done, and even like going back as far as like Gleison Tebow and Clay Guida, especially Clay Guida. I remember watching that. I know RDA was really young in his career, but like Guida just kind of wrestled him and kept him on the floor. And we heard about this grappling game that he had, but you never seen it kind of come to fruition. And I don't think we've really seen that against anybody in the UFC thus far, him off his back doing that well. So the blueprint is definitely there, I think, for Kevin Lee. And Kevin Lee is definitely a guy who can wrestle. And if he does get you on the floor, like he takes everybody's back, which would be really interesting if he could take RDA's back. But he doesn't always finish people when he has his back, which is weird. But yeah, like I think the blueprint is there. If Kevin Lee wrestles, can get him to the floor and can grind out a decision, which is going to be 5 rounds. So, I think in this case, I'm going to give a bit of an advantage to the guy who's fought at this weight before as well, especially because it's 5 rounds.
Interesting. What about the reach? There's a big reach advantage there as well. It's 77-inch reach advantage in favour. Kevin Lee is 77 and RDA is 70. So we know TKO, knockout, they're both like low percentage for Kevin Lee, but maybe that's something you can utilise into this one, sticking, something we've seen Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I'm certainly not comparing the striking, but something we've seen with Cowboy Cerrone, used his reach brilliantly against Iaquinta, peppering off that jab. Do you reckon that could be something that we could see in this fight, where he might try to chain up his takedowns by utilising his reach? And because you're going to find RDA is going to have to try and get on the inside, and if he gets too close, boom, change levels, takedown.
Yeah, I guess so. The reach is there. I wonder how he would use it, because you would assume that he wants to get close. Speaking of Kevin Lee, because you'd assume that he wants to get some takedowns. Especially when he kind of mixes up his game. I think he fights best when he mixes up his game with everything. So you'd wonder if he does try fight from range. RDA has proven that he's really good at closing distance and getting people up against the cage and landing shots from there. So I don't know if the reach is going to be that much of a factor here, but you never know.
What I was meaning by that was more so to keep him at bay. And then when RDA does close that range, change levels, take it down. Interesting. Now, I know, again, these stats will have changed significantly in RDA's recent fights, but he's got a 58% takedown defense, which isn't great.
Not great.
So fully expect to see Kevin Lee. I'm just looking at the UFC website here, and Kevin Lee
Lee's
gets
takedown?
3.1 takedowns per 15 minutes. So good stat there for Kevin Lee. And again, I think the blueprint is there. It's really all about how well he looks at welterweight. He's the bigger man as well. He's a couple of inches taller than RDA. So I think in some ways, for your first fight at welter, this is a good one to come into. He's fighting a former lightweight as well. Well, if he was coming in and fighting, somebody like if he was fighting the Darren Till, you know what I mean, someone who's big. Yeah. You know what I mean? A big welterweight. So he's on the favourable size body type.
Yeah, body type I think it's excellent, but it's still RDA. You're still coming in. Your first shot at welterweight is against a top guy. And, RDA is not going to be competing for the welterweight title anytime soon. But he's still a really good fighter there. And he has proven that he's an excellent fighter. He's beaten some really good guys like Robbie Lawler. Even Neil Magny, if you want to talk about reach, he's dealt with his reach. Even Tarek Saffiedine fights really, really well at range, and he beat him. So, yeah, I think... body type wise is perfect. It's not a huge enormous guy, but then it's still a really, really good fighter who's going to put on pressure for 5 rounds. And how is your gas tank going to deal with that?
And I throw it back to the Iaquinta fight as well, where we said if you look at Iaquinta, how he fought Kevin Lee, he could stop the takedowns. He kept him striking, he kept him standing, and if RDA can do that, that's definitely his path to victory. I think a lot of people, and it happens to me, I'm very guilty of doing it as well, is a lot of people only remember the last couple of fights from fighters, and that's where they make their judgment of, and I am 100% guilty of that. So RDA, you're looking at him, the 2 losses, they were really, the word unanimous doesn't even say how unanimous they were, really. They were strong losses where he was well beaten, but this could be a fight. If he can stop the takedown, it could be a way that RDA gets in here. But for me, I actually see Kevin Lee mixing up a strike and using the strike and that range, but using his kickboxing to get in, to get that takedown, change levels, use RDA trying to work his way on the inside. He'll have to get on the inside, use that momentum of RDA coming forward to change levels and get the takedown. As you said, potentially takes everybody's back. And I'm going to go to Kevin Lee, rear naked choke here, get the finish, and make a nice debut at welterweight. So my submission is Kevin Lee.
I'm going to go RDA. I just think there's plenty of questions that are there, and I think it's just enough for me to think that this is going to be RDA's fight to win. I still think Kevin Lee can be really good at welterweight, but I just feel RDA is going to win this one. Although I will say that RDA has looked quite flat in his last 2 ones, but that's against 2 really good wrestlers, a terrible style for him. But I wouldn't be surprised if you got something similar with Kevin Lee who can do that. I'm just skeptical as well about the 5 rounds, but I'll go RDA. I'll go decision.
What have you got, Sean? Any interesting points? Anybody selling any leather materials?
No, quite a close fight in the betting and in the Tapology predictions as well.
Oh yeah.
I was going to mention the reach advantage. Tapology and the UFC website, by the sounds of it, have different stats on the reach.
Oh jeez.
So that's great stuff from the UFC. But the Tapology predictions are 57% for Kevin Lee and 43% for Dos Anjos, and then the price or the fight is priced up. RDA 4-5 and Kevin Lee 10-11. So very close fight. I like Kevin Lee personally at welterweight. I think he should have moved up a long time ago. So yeah, I'm backing Kevin Lee to have a successful debut at welterweight.
Great stuff.
Excellent. Good. Your co-main event sees Neil Magny take on Vincent Lecoux. Unfair is probably it's a weird place to see Neil Magny co-main on this after coming off the loss to Ponzinibbio. Tough fight though. It's after fighting Ponzinibbio potentially is it could be looking at title contention pretty soon. So to come off that loss and then take on Lecoux is a tough matchup.
It's a very tough matchup, but I like it because Vincente Luque has been on a great run. Like he had that huge win over Nico Price, which kind of started his run. Like he only lost to Leon Edwards before that.
Yep.
And then
it shows when Leon Edwards is doing now, sort of. It makes it the loss not as seem as
puts a bit of shine on it.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. And then he's had this kind of really good run. And then that last fight with Barberena was a barn burner. It was a great fight. And he's just a very, very good striker, and he's dangerous. And I think you're right. I think that's why it's kind of interesting to see Neil Magny, who came off a potential, title contender coming up against Vicente Luque. But he's been calling for this now. He's been calling for somebody in the top 10. I'm not sure where Neil Magny is ranked, but I think he's ranked pretty highly. So it's definitely the biggest fight in Luque's career so far, and it's his biggest test. And I think Magny is sometimes underrated, but he's also a guy who I hate betting on because, he went on that crazy run, and then sometimes he let you down. I'm going to go Luque here. I like Luque in this fight. I'm not sure where people are going to go with it. It's not necessarily a new guy, and it's a guy whose career and his record doesn't look amazing, like 15-6-1. It's not the shiniest record, but I think he's really good, and I think he's made such big improvements lately. I just think he's going to piece him up on the feet. I really do. I think he's an excellent fighter. I think it's a tough fight for Magny. But Magny, again, he's just a weird fighter. That reach is insane, and if he gets it to the floor, he is good on top. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm gonna go Luque.
I agree with you with Luque. When you look at Luque's record as well, like the record doesn't scream amazing, as you said, but records are for DJs, as Neil Seary would say. Yeah. But his losses, I think he only has 2 losses in the UFC. And his finish rate, he's 8 wins by TKO KO, 7 by submission, and judges only had to write a scorecard just the once.
So he's not Elias Teodoro.
Yeah, he's not. Don't put the kettle on in this one. Funny enough, when he loses, it's tend to be by decision. So that's where a lot of his losses have come from.
Yeah.
But I think trajectory is something we talk about. When you look at Luque, he seems to be potentially on the way up. He's not like. I'm just trying to find his age actually. What age he? Because something, he's 27. So Magny, but 31, prime his life for a welterweight thereabouts.
80 inch reach, Magny.
Yeah, huge. That's him. He will hit you from across the octagon.
Yeah.
Like Bruce Buffer will say, fighters to the centre of the cage. Big Dean will say, touch gloves, and he'll touch you from his corner. Yeah. But Luque, impressive 4-fight win streak, and them wins are all coming with big finishes as well. He's the type of fighter that fans like watching fight because he's always going for the finish. He doesn't try and play it safe,
which can be a bad thing.
It can be, but not for us fans. It's awesome. But Magny is weird, and again,
we could just stop there.
No,
Magny is weird. Moving on.
But and what I mean by that, it's almost a cowboy effect, where just sometimes it just isn't as nice.
Yeah.
Just sometimes he doesn't turn up. When Neil Magny turns up, he is one of the best in the world.
Yeah.
But there's just some nights he doesn't. But I think here I'm going to go with Luque, and I'm going to go with a finish as well, get the job done, and it'll be late. It'll be probably in the third. I'll be looking at Sean just there for
done that before.
Bookmakers. What are we looking at?
A very, very big betting favourite is Vicente Luque.
Wow! I'm actually surprised by that. Like that, he's a big huge bet. Yeah.
So he's 1-6, and Magny is 7-2. Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Wow.
The gambler in me now is nearly saying stick some money on Neil Magny.
That's huge.
The Tapology community reckon 76% have backed Luque and 24% have backed Magny.
You'd wonder how the odds reflect Tapology's picks as well, because sometimes it doesn't, but I wonder.
So the Tapology community have that fight being a bit closer than the bookies.
Yeah.
So
Magny
is ranked 15th in the world as well.
Wow. That's huge odds, man. Magny is underrated. As I said, I think Luque wins the fight, but man, jeez, it's big.
Yeah, that is big, and that's a gamble. Like if you are
fond of a punt,
if you're fond of a punt, that is a little snaky. That's definitely a snake.
Don't listen to what we said. Just stick your money on Magny.
Yeah,
it is weird though.
Maybe just stay away from that one.
Yeah, maybe stay away from that one.
No, gamble, folks. Gamble.
Keep gaming.
Antonio Carlos Jr. taking on Ian Heinisch, we'll go with, fair enough. Of course, he come off Dana White's Contender Series, taking on Antonio Carlos Jr. What did I say? He won Brazil tough, didn't he? Back in the day.
Carlos Antonio Jr.?
Yeah.
He might have.
I think he did.
He might have.
Can't remember off the top of my head. I think he did.
That's a great nickname, though. Shoeface.
Shoeface, that's right.
Yeah. Are you thinking of Matanche?
I don't know.
Cesar Ferreira?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I am. What's your shots in this one up?
just looking at, I'm going to do a bit of MMA maths because it works all the time. No, but looking back at Ian Heinisch's last fight, I was super impressed with how he dealt with a good grappler in Cesar Ferreira, who we just spoke about. And he got out of some bad and tricky situations, and I thought he looked good with his wrestling, his grappling, getting back to his feet, and then punishing Mutanche when he was on the feet. And I think that's going to be enough against someone like Carlos Antonio Jr. or Antonio Carlos Jr. Because he likes to get it to the floor. His striking is all right. But I just think that Heinisch is going to be able to do a good job to stay on his feet and just work him. He's a really, really good athlete. As a Shoeface is, he's ripped, but I just think Heinisch is a really good athlete. I like what I've seen from him in the past. And as well, if you look at Shoeface's record, 2018, it's about a year ago since he last fought Tim Bosch, beat by rear naked choke, and it was only a 1-round fight. So he's not, the freshest of fighters right now. He's been out for a while. He's had a couple of cancelled bouts. So I'm going to go Heinisch. I just think he's the better athlete, the better fighter at this point.
Of course, he was due to fight Elias Theodoro on 2 occasions, and the fight never happened. Like, fuck for that.
Very big reach advantage in this one again.
Is that what's the reach advantage? I guess
so. Antonio Carlos Jr. has an 8-inch reach advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense.
According to the UFC website, he has an 80-inch reach advantage because Carlos Jr. has an 80-inch reach and Heinisch has no reach,
no limbs,
no limbs.
Sound really excited for this one, Noel.
I like this fight.
Yeah, it's a tough one to choose because it's a real, clash of styles. I wouldn't even class it as a clash of styles.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit.
I
I don't think Noel likes this fight.
I really don't. No, it's not that I don't like the fight. I think this fight has the potential to cancel each other out.
I get what you mean.
And by styles make fights, that's always used in a good term, but it's almost like Tyron Woodley and Wonderboy. It's 2 magnificent fighters, but when you stick the 2 of them in the cage, it doesn't go very well, and that's what I just have a bad feeling. Watch, this will be fight of the year now. I just sort of have a feeling that potentially this is what is the offering here. 2 decent records up against one another, 10-2 against 12-1. If Carlos Jr. gets it to the mat, potentially submissions are key. But I don't know. Coin flip, I don't know. We'll say Heinisch today. Coin flip, but I don't know. I just think it's 2. I think they're going to null and void each other out. Could be wrong though.
Anything on that?
Antonio Carlos Jr. priced up at 4-9, quite a big favourite, and Ian Heinisch 13-8.
Go check out Heinisch's backstory as well. He has a pretty interesting one.
82% of the Tapology community have picked Junior.
Yeah, actually, coin flip. I'll go with Junior, Carl.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, sorry, I keep taking sips of water. And what's that called that you said, Sean, I was doing earlier that people will enjoy?
ASMR.
Yeah.
That's the shit that Till was going on about the kind of
Yeah. It's just people make some noises and people find it so.
Yeah, basically.
Trickling over the
Let us know if you'd like us to do an episode in ASMR.
Yeah.
This is a few.
Be a 6-hour episode.
Yeah. Moving on. Megan Anderson takes on Felicia Spencer at 145. Spencer coming across from Invicta. Of course, she won the vacant Invicta 145 belt. So congratulations on winning that. You know, fighting the UFC where you don't hold the belt.
Yeah.
Megan Anderson, what do we think of this one?
I think this is the type of fight that Megan Anderson should have got once she came to the UFC. She's a really good athlete and she done really well in Invicta, but she still showed a lot of holes in her game, which was obvious because she only had, 6 fights or 5 fights by the time she got over to the UFC, pro fights. So, and she lost to Cindy Dandaway. Oh, jeez. So this is the type of fight that you kind of would have expected somebody like a prospect like this to fight, another kind of young up-and-coming prospect.
Yeah.
So I do like the fight in that sense. I haven't seen too much of Spencer. I've seen that fight. And if you put them 2 in there, even when Megan was fighting in there, I'd pick Megan. I think she's the better fighter and the better athlete. So I'm going to pick Anderson to win, probably by a finish. But I think this fight makes sense, for where they both are. Even though Anderson has the bigger name, I think it makes sense in terms of their career. He had similar amount of fights and experience. I like it.
I'm just looking at height. So Megan Anderson is 6 foot. She's
big girl,
a tall girl, yeah, and she's long. It's coming off that fight with Katsaganos, which was a really strange fight, resulting in that weird injury. Yeah, that's not Megan Anderson's fault, but it was a bit weird. But she's going to be towering over Spencer. Spencer's only standing 5'6", so that is a huge difference in height. Especially when you're fighting somebody who's a kickboxer like Megan Anderson, that style of fighter. So it could be a tough night in the office. But in saying that, Felicia, you don't become a champion in Invicta or any promotion without having capability. So I don't really know too much about her. I'm probably just going to go on the bias side of Megan Anderson because I think that the UFC will want to promote her. She's a good fighter. The likes of the podcast and everything she does, so she's out there, she's got a voice, and realistically I think they see it's good that they're building this sort of weight class because they need to build this weight class. They need to get more fighters in there. But I'll go Megan Anderson using that range and striking. I'm not. Oh, by the way, we're just going off the Tapology running order of the card. Yeah. The UFC card potentially says different. That's the main
UFC
event.
website is known to be wrong sometimes.
Yeah, we'll go with Tapology.
According to Tapology as well, Spencer has no reach, so no arms. So that should be a big help to Megan Anderson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the betting odds,
wouldn't you wonder? Like, you've signed for the biggest promotion in the world. Go, come here. You wouldn't do us a favour there. Put your spam out there and get a measuring tape out. And
they just do it on the day.
Text it over to us, will you?
Yeah.
They obviously do. They just when they arrive, they get all.
I'd lie. I'd say I have like a 62-inch reach just to put them off. Like, oh, grand. Don't have to worry about the jab.
Yeah.
In the betting, Megan Anderson is 8-13 and Spencer 6-5.
It's crazy, isn't it? Like, you'd assume that because Megan Anderson is, the more well-known fighter here, you'd assume that she'd be a bigger favourite than Vincente Luque over Neil Magny.
Probably a bit of the record as well. So like
Spencer's
won the last 5
fights. But she's on including her amateur career, she's on an 11-fight win streak. So I don't think this is a given. Like,
I'm not saying it's a given. I just mean just in terms of even people
compared to
people
Luque.
picking,
it's interesting that Luque is the one, the 6th favourite, not Megan Anderson.
It usually goes that way. Interesting.
Charles Oliveira takes on Nick Lentz in £155. And Rob, you will always say about Charles Oliveira, if he can get his style of fight going, if he can get the submissions attempts, if he can do this, but when the fight turns against him, that's when you see him quit. But currently on a 4-fight win streak, and all 4 by finish by submission. So having a good time with it recently is Oliveira.
Yeah, and the few times where that happened, where the fight really wasn't going his way, for at least moments, for maybe like a round, was against Nick Lentz in their last fight, because they fought twice before, and there was that weird one. The first fight ended with the illegal knee. I think it ended with the illegal knee. There wasn't an illegal knee. That's the kind of result, but I'm not sure if it continued. And then you had the second fight where Nick Lentz done well in the second round, got chewed up in the first round, and then in the third round there was a submission which was beautiful. But he's kind of difficult to bet on, Charles Oliveira, but recently he's looked really good, and Nick Lentz hasn't looked that impressive. He's on a bit of a streak himself, but those were 2 kind of hard, grindy fights where I just didn't think he'd come out looking that great versus Oliveira, who I just think has been looking the best he's ever looked in the last while. And I just think with Nick Lentz, the fact that he likes to grapple and the fact that he will commit to his grappling will open the doors for Charles Oliveira, like it did in their second fight. And I just see Charles Oliveira getting a submission here. There was a few moments in their second fight where Oliveira kind of put himself in some bad positions when he was on the floor, because he does like to go for those subs. But I just see him maybe grabbing a neck or something, looking for a choke, similar to the second fight.
There's the old expression, position before submission. Yeah. And that sometimes is something that Oliveira goes away from. Yeah, he'll hunt the submission,
and it works a lot of time,
and lose position because of it, and gets himself in danger. I agree here. Oliveira, it almost looks like he's hit a point in his career of maturity.
Yeah.
He is still only 29 as well, according to Tapology.
Yeah, but I mean, like in how he approaches his fights, and like I know his weight is always an issue for him, making the weight as well, but he for me he seems more settled in the cage. He doesn't seem as rushed and everything. So yeah, I see Charles Oliveira here as I'd be interested to see the odds actually, but I would imagine he's a big favourite as well on the card.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nick Lentz, I really just see Charles Oliveira and going the same way, getting the submission.
He's a bigger dude
inside the first round as well. I can see him getting it done as well.
Nice.
So yeah, he's just. I just think he's matured, and where the point I'm saying about submission or position before submission, he's gone away from that, and he's a little bit more controlled in his attack.
And he's an underrated striker, I think.
Yeah,
he is an underrated striker.
With that too. Yeah. But I think if Lentz can survive the early attacks and maybe work to the body and try and take away some of the gas tanky, heart is the question. And for the love of God, Charles Oliveira just reminds me of Nanny that used to play for United.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Absolute spit of him. And a bit like Nanny as well. Some days he turns up and he's phenomenal, then other days you're like, this fella's a clown. But I'll go Charles Oliveira submission. What are the odds, Sean?
95% of Tapology voters have picked Oliveira, which is interesting. Not quite reflected in the odds. Oliveira is a big favourite. He's 3-10, and Nick Lentz is 11-5.
There's a little bit of biasy there as well, because I just think a lot of people don't like Nick Lentz. They really dislike him, for understandable reasons.
What reasons are they?
He's a bit of a dick.
I'm trying to figure out now, because I'm looking at Tapology and I'm like, I don't want to do a fight that's not on the card. So, but I do think this is on it. The debut Ramos and Austin Hubbard
I think it is.
Opens up the main card, I believe. Thoughts on this one in the lightweight division?
It's a good fight. I like Davy Ramos. He's an absolute stud at grappling. If you look at, I was looking at it today because I wanted to see, because I know people always talk about his credentials. If you look at who he's beaten in BJJ, he has Augusto Mendes on his kill list. He has Jeff Monson on his kill list. And Jeff Monson is a heavyweight. Davy Ramos is a lightweight. So, do the math. So he's really, really good there. And I was watching some highlights of Hubbard, and he likes to grapple himself, which makes me think that this is Ramos's fight to lose.
Yeah.
If he does grapple with him, I just see Ramos getting on top and getting a submission probably pretty quickly. But again, it's a debut fight for Hubbard. We don't really know what he's made of just yet. We'll see. But I just think this is a tough fight. Coming in fighting Davy Ramos in your debut fight, and you like to grapple yourself. Like, he has striking, he likes to strike, but every highlight I see from him, he strikes into some takedowns, and that could be a problem. So I'm gonna go Ramos by submission, first or second round.
He do wise to stay on the outside. He's the much taller fighter in this one. I know we're talking about height and all that stuff as well, but he is the much taller fighter, standing 5'10", while Davy Ramos is 5'6". So significant reach advantage on his side as well. It's not actually; it's only about 2-3 inches. But yeah, you're gonna get choked out if you play the game. You know what I mean. If you engage, it'd be quite similar to like saying, you know what, I'm gonna fight Damian Moya and I'm gonna try to take him down. Don't do that.
Gunnar Nelson done it.
Yeah,
didn't work.
Davy Ramos, for me here by submission. But again, Austin Hubbard, don't know all that much about him. Coming into it, so he could be the. I always refer to this as the Mike Perry. He could be the Mike Perry.
The shadow
of picks on it. The shadow on site. And stand out here on the undercard. That is what we believe.
What's the odds
is
in
the
this
main
match?
card. Yeah, sorry, odds there. Sean.
Davy Ramos 1-4, quite a big favourite, and then Hubbard 5-2. So
makes sense.
One that stands out for me is Aspen Ladd on the prelims. Soraya Eubanks. Aspen Ladd has looked great.
Yeah, looks really good, and it's a good fight for her because Eubanks obviously has that name from coming off tough. But she's also, it's not this weird fight where Aspen Ladd is coming up and, Eubanks has been around for so long. They're they're both kind of inexperienced, relative to everybody else. But man, Aspen Ladd is fun to watch, and she's vicious. Like, if you look at her picture, it's like, she looks nice and sweet, and then nope, she's crazy. So that's a fun fight, really fun fight.
What I liked about Aspen Ladd as well is potentially one of the biggest cards last time out when she fought. She was on the Abib McGregor card, and not a bother to her. Got in there, Tanya Evinger beat the brakes off her. Excellent undercard fight. But anything else, Rob, that jumps out to you on the undercard?
Not really. I'm interested to see how.
Nope, the rest is shite.
I'm interested to see how Trevin Giles does against Zach Cummins. Zach Cummins has been around for a while, but looking at Giles' record, he has some really good names on that. He's 11-0. He's beaten Bragan Neto. He's beaten Ryan Spann, who had that huge win recently last week. So yeah, I'm interested to see how he does, and he has a lot of finishes, finishes on his career. So yeah, check him out.
Excellent. That is UFC on ESPN plus 10. Dos Anjos against Kevin Lee. A few good fights. Speaking of a few good fights, it's now that time of the show where we fight your corner. So Rob, get your hands up. So Fight Your Corner, this is a part of the show where myself and Robert are unaware of a topic that Sean has. Sean is going to give us a topic. Again, we don't know what it is. And you have to argue for or against this topic. How we decide that is the classic rock, paper, scissors. So if you win the rock, paper, scissors, you are pro whatever Sean says. So if Sean says MMA Mats is real and you've won, you have to defend that MMA Mats is real. We done that a couple of weeks ago. So on the count of 3, Robert. 1, 2, 3. Mine fucked them straight away. Fantastic. So Sean, just in case you were wondering, I told Rob I was going to do scissors before we started. I done rock. No, I done paper.
So deceiving.
You
You done rock, I win.
No. So Sean, what have you got for this week?
This week I was thinking about, if you remember when Holloway got pulled from the Khabib fight and Paul Felder was in line for the title shot, but he wasn't allowed to take the title shot because he was outside the top 15 in the rankings.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking, in their current form, how relevant are the UFC rankings? So who won? No one won.
Yeah.
So he's saying that they are relevant and they are important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I will let you go first, Robert.
Okay.
Best of luck.
Okay. Yeah, so the UFC rankings are, well, they're definitely flawed. So we can start there. And they're not relevant because, first thing, the UFC almost admit they're not relevant when they don't put the guys who are supposed to be, number one contenders in fights with guys who are champions. It happens all the time. So the UFC admit themselves that they're not relevant. And also, the process of actually coming up with the rankings is a completely irrelevant and illogical way of doing it. They're getting these journalists who, go onto the list of journalists who work it out, and you probably won't even know one of them. And if you know one of them, well done, fair play to you, because I don't. So the way they actually come up with the list is completely irrelevant, doesn't work. The way that the list is actually used, and they're supposed to be used, the rankings, doesn't work because they don't actually do it. So it's completely meaningless. The reason for the UFC rankings, the way they were supposed to be used, is to actually, almost like a real sport. Like, this guy is number one, let's put number one in there. But how many times have we seen, Conor McGregor, not number one, come up, he's going to get a title shot? How many times have we seen things like that? So the UFC themselves, who are supposed to be the overseer of these rankings, have basically admitted to us they're not relevant, they don't matter, who cares?
Thanks, Rob.
On take 2 we got there.
Yeah.
So the rankings are relevant. It's very different to saying your argument there of how many times has someone jumped the queue. It's very different than fighting, where ranking is, it's not like Formula 1, a guy is ranked here, a guy is ranked there. With fighting, it's availability and opportunity knocks, and opportunity is only presented through preparation and etc. All these wonderful sayings. But if you're ranked number 1 or you're ranked number 2, but you are not either fit or ready to go to fight on a certain date, they're going to move and make the next fight. Obviously, then the UFC wants to make fan fights too, so that comes into aspect as well in it. But when you look at the ranking system, for example, currently in bantamweight division, Marlon Moraes is ranked number 1 in the bantamweight division. Would you disagree with that? No, you wouldn't. Jose Aldo was ranked number 1 under Max Holloway. That will change now after the weekend's fights. Moving on to the lightweight division, Dustin Poirier is ranked number 1. Tyron Woodley is ranked number 1 in welter. Israel Adesanya is ranked number 1 in middleweight, and Daniel Cormier is ranked number 1 in light heavy, and Stipe is ranked in heavyweight. Now, every one of them is factually correct. They are the right heavyweights, the right rankings. But it changes with the likes of obviously when fights happen, they landslide, they go up. You're right, the journalists that pick it, you mightn't know them, but they will assess what has happened in the fight in previous fights, and the rankings come available. Like any of them that I say to you, you're not going to disagree with too much. There's always going to be a disagreement no matter what, no matter who's picking it. But the ranking system is there where you can see. We always talk about the interim champion as the glorified number one ranked fighter. And when you look at the rankings, they're all ranked currently number one, the interim champions that are there. I just diminish the argument of making fights when someone's not there, because number one, availability, number two, they mightn't be fit to go, and that's a simple aspect in fighting. These things happen. But the ranking system, it is flawed. That opinion can come into it and people can be biased, but it's important for fighters' pay and for the matchups they get. You will regularly see fighters in the cage themselves call out to, I want to fight a top 10 opponent. So the fighters reference the rankings themselves. The UFC will try and make the fights to climb you up the ladder. They're not going to put you in there against a top guy, let's say rank 2. They're not going to put him someone who's not ranked.
Ask you to wrap it up soon, Noel.
Yeah, I will. So it doesn't happen where they're going to put number 2 against a guy who's not ranked. So the simple fact that the fighters call out for ranked opponents and the UFC don't match high ranked opponents against unranked opponents shows that they do take it serious.
You explained how rankings work, which I thought was a weird argument. Like, yeah, there's like people who are ranked number 1 with their champions are ranked number 2, but like a lot of them aren't really factual. A lot of them you can debate. Like there are some that are kind of like, well, it's obvious.
Be a debate in every rank.
It's obvious, yeah. But like you said, most of them were fact. Well, a lot of them just aren't.
Who would you disagree with that I called out there?
Who'd you call out? I wasn't really listening to all of them.
I called out every division apart from I went.
Well, here's one thing. I've seen on many occasions, and we actually, funny enough, we got an email off somebody on Twitter, or was it the Twitter message? Direct message, DM. Someone slid into our DMs and showed us his kind of assessment of the UFC rankings and how they changed. And they changed just illogically. There was guys who were moving up when they didn't fight, guys who were moving down when they didn't fight. There was no fights on a weekend and the rankings changed. And there was like, and also someone fought a few times and just didn't move in rankings. So
you're now trying to explain why the rankings
don't work.
No, but you're trying to say the metrics of how they work. The question
that's not the metrics. That's
the question is how relevant are the rankings. Paul Felder didn't get a matchup because he's not ranked in the top 15. So the question is the relevant, not how they come about.
Well, that's a bit silly as well. Like if with Paul Felder clearly looking at the other guys that potentially could have got a fight there, clearly he was able to get in there. Like there shouldn't be somebody stopping somebody because they're ranked a couple of like 3 or 4 things down because of some guy who we don't even know says he can't fight. That's silly.
That was just
ridiculous.
New York.
That was silly. So that's irrelevant. And also the way, as I said, the way that the rankings are actually built, they're clearly irrelevant, illogical, and don't work because...
Then why does a ranked fighter not fight an unranked fighter?
They do.
If they're irrelevant.
They do.
When was the last time you seen a top 5 guy?
I can't give you an example now, but they 100% have.
Top 10 guy against somebody outside top 15.
Habib and your man fucking Horcher a while ago.
That was a short notice fight that they had to have Habib.
Yeah, I can't name one, but that has happened loads of times, plenty of times.
You're not going to get a Brian Ortega, for example, who's ranked number 2 right now, fighting somebody outside the top 15. That's also another because it's ranking.
But I also think that's also another reason why it kind of ruins the. I guess
but fighters call it out
great
in the
thing.
UFC.
Yeah, but it kind of ruins a part of the sport where guys are ranked number 4 because Joe Blow said they're ranked number 4, and they won't fight number 7 because Joe Blow ranked him number 7.
Joe Blow, that's disrespectful because it's not Joe Blow. They
don't even rank them.
It's a select amount of journalists that put it in. So you're being disrespectful to fellow journalist colleagues by implying that.
That is not being disrespectful. If you look at
Joe Blow, it's not one guy. Like Brian Ortega.
Who the hell is Eddie Pamini?
Brian Ortega.
I've never seen him.
Brian Ortega is
David
not
Brown?
Ranked number 2 in the world because one guy thinks he's ranked number 2. It's a collective amount. Do you not think Brian Ortega is number 2 in the world?
Number 2. I don't know. I'd have to assess that. I don't know on the spot. But if I'm looking at this, right, Eddie Papini, right? I'm not calling these guys out. It's hugely flawed. Eddie Papini, Grant Gordon, Jeff Kane, Kin Pisha, Rob DeMello. I haven't heard of any of these. Where's Ariel Hawani? Where's Luke Thomas?
They probably don't know who.
Where's Chuck Mindenhall? Where's all these?
They don't know who Robert Palin is either.
100%, and that's why I shouldn't be on the rankings. That's why they should have a different system.
But hold on, just right, you're telling me then, right, that Ariel Hawani, who interviews fighters, and you can watch Ariel Hawani and see.
I'm sure these guys do that as well.
let me finish the point. You can see that Ariel Helwani has certain relationship with certain fighters. You can see Luke Thomas has certain relationships with fighters. So if you ask Luke Thomas about Israel Adesanya, he'd say he's the best thing since sliced bread. So there's that comes into it as well. So you know,
I'm
just
sure,
because you don't know
I'm
who
not,
the journalists,
I'm not saying
just
that.
because you don't know who the journalists are, you can't disrespect their work just because you haven't heard of them.
I'm not saying that journalists have to do it. But I'm saying if they're actually going to go this way and have journalists who are involved in the sport do it, they should get the top ones, the ones that are the most reliable. Not guys we don't know who they are. And if you want to go with that argument, these guys could have some kind of relationship with our fighters as well. So that just...
The sport is so young and the ranking system is so young that it's a way of formatting the sport so that the best fight the best, and it's not opinion based with
happen,
a
though.
matchmaker where it's just going, I want to make this fight, I want to make this fight. There is no denying if, for example, Marlon Moraes did not get the next shot at the title, that people would go absolutely crazy about it. And for some reason, they just gave it to, like, let's say, John Lineker. Yeah, John Lineker, you're getting it. You'd be like, how are you giving it to John Lineker when he's ranked number 10?
Why did TJ get a title shot at flyweight?
TJ was the champion and he wanted to move down.
not even-
That's a super fight. That's different. We're living in the era of WCM.
He only won the
whatever
title,
they
though.
call it.
He only won the
Yeah, but
title.
it's still a fight of dropping down. Why did Conor McGregor get
But
a shot at Eddie
what about-
Alvarez? It's a shot at history.
But silly. If you're going to go with rankings, go with rankings and actually match make based on rankings, because you were saying that so many fights have, you know, the fights that kind of didn't go along with the rankings were all injuries and all stuff. But we don't know that. Half of these fights, like Tony Ferguson, potentially could have fought Dustin Poirier or something like that. I think it was. Yeah, Dustin Poirier. That could have happened, but he didn't make it because apparently Tony wanted to negotiate. So it was like, fuck the rankings, let's just go with somebody else.
Yeah, but like that's also a part of it. Is fighters might be greedy and want to negotiate a new contract, and the UFC or whatever promotion might be like, no, we have this fight lined up. This is what the pay is. This is whatever. So that's a part of the aspect that comes into it. Like a fighter can be offered a fight.
Actually, to be fair, it was Max Holloway who was supposed to fight.
A fighter
which makes
can be
it worse
offered
'cause the
a
rankings
fight.
aren't even there.
A fighter can be offered a fight and turn the fight down. That also has to come into play. So you might say we can't prove that, but you also can't prove that they did accept the fight and they didn't get it because of rankings. Fighter can turn down fight just as equal.
Absolutely, yeah. But I just think that they've shown on many occasions,
Wrap this up. This is going on way too
many
long.
occasions that they don't go by the rankings, and it just doesn't happen. It's just a number that doesn't really make sense and it doesn't matter.
You totally don't agree with that.
I do.
You really fucking don't.
Closing statements.
Put out the first edition of this. The ranking system is vitally important because you have a champion. So a champion is on a pedestal and you have to have the people that are in line to take it. Like the royal family in any country, there's the first heir, there's the next heir, there's the next heir. So you fight your way up a ranking ladder that you can see. You can negotiate for both your contract, your money, and a shot at the title that you can say, I am ranked number 1 in the world. I want my title shot. There's not a stronger argument than that.
I think the UFC in particular have gone so long before rankings, and I think it worked out pretty fine. I don't think anyone really had any issue with it. I think before the rankings were brought in, I think we've seen the best fights. I think we've seen the contenders who should have got title fights get title fights for the most part. So I don't think anything has been fixed by introducing the rankings. There's no proof that it has. I think that having these outside individuals who, like, even if it was me, even if it was anybody, basically saying who you can and can't fight when the promoter should be doing that anyway. There's no need for the rankings. I think it's silly. I think the whole system is flawed, and I think that it badly impacts the fighter. Badly
Impacts the fighter.
Badly impacts the fighter.
Grant, waffled on there.
Interesting one. I'd be interested to know your actual views on it as well.
Yeah, we know what Rob's is.
Yeah. For me, that one was Noel.
Disagree.
Do you genuinely disagree?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah, I know. No, I thought.
I think
no.
right. Yeah. No.
Why did you go with me?
Your closing statement kind of won me over as well. Rob's opening statement I thought was quite good. Your opening statement was a bit.
His second attempt at opening
Yeah, the
statement?
second attempt.
Yeah.
We got to let the cat out of the bag because we said that a few
Oh
times.
yeah. I thought I was going for the other way.
When we asked the question when Sean asked the question first, and I picked Rob to go first on this, he misunderstood and thought he had to say that the rankings are legitimate and they're badly needed. So he started to say, yes, they are legitimate because, and I spoke across him, and then we said, yeah, we got to go again. He misunderstood the question.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But yeah, your opening statement wasn't the best, where you just read out the rankings and said, "Yeah, they're right, they're right."
No,
they're
but
right.
but if you think about it, right, when you're reading them out, like I didn't want to. I was going to focus on one weight class, but like they number one ranking. It's not hard to get right. I don't think.
No, they're all easy. Like
I think the process behind them might be flawed, but I do think they're important, as in to have a reference point there.
That's what I agree. Because I can't argue that the process shouldn't be there, so I had to go a different way with it. And
that's where I came to at the end when I started saying, as the sport is new, you know,
they're
we
terrible.
need a
The
ranking
rankings are awful, but you know they should be there.
Yeah, the process behind them stinks.
There should be a different way around it.
Throwing fire at journalists.
What?
You want to be ashamed.
Who the fuck
of
are they?
yourself. You want to be ashamed of yourself. So it's now what 4.5 to 2.5 because you scored as a draw.
Yeah.
Real opinion of it, they're so flawed. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. But it's
like,
it is a good idea to have them.
Yes, you need it for the sport. Like I said, almost like with the royal family, there's the next heir to the throne or whatever. And I think it's there. Like I think their top 5 in rankings are easier to get than a top 15.
Yeah,
in
like
rankings.
like if you're not getting the top 5 right, you know, you might not get 5 or 6 right. But like if you're not getting the top 3 right, you're really doing something wrong. You know, it's fairly obvious.
Yeah, it is
Cool.
weird.
Moving on.
I won again. That's the main thing, that all that matters. But it's time for Sean to get out the school bag, get out the notepad, and tell us what he thought of the fights we gave him, and what we're going to give him some new fights as well to keep educating him. So that time of the week to educate young Sean. So last week, Sean, we gave you 2 cracking fights, in my opinion. Rob went with the low-hanging fruit because we talked about it in the MMA history. He gave you Bonner against Griffin. I gave you a bloodbath. I know what I'm starting to get your likes. I know what you like. You like a little bit of blood. You like a little bit of gore. Yeah. So I went with BJ Penn against Joe Daddy Stevenson. Mm-hmm. What do we think of this one?
I was really interested to see BJ Penn because my memories of BJ are of him recently and basically losing all the time. But obviously he was a former champion. He looked very good in this fight, like very impressive. That cut was nasty on Daddy Stevenson. Just opened up. It was spurting blood everywhere. It was grim.
This is the one I'm right in saying that. I know where he got up on. Is that?
Yeah.
That was the end of it.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Really good fight. Enjoyed it. BJ Penn looked really good. So it was interesting to see what he was. That was his prime. Like
he's a fucking savage. It's like he was like miles ahead of so many fighters back then. Like insane, like, skill wise. Like. Yeah. You didn't even need the endurance that you kind of need these days because he was just so much ahead in everything, really, as a fighter.
Yeah, but scary good.
Savage.
It's sad to see, isn't it?
It's grim. Like,
I'd ask you, after watching him perform, what did you think of him at the weekend? But we can't ask that.
Yeah.
Because Sean was locked. Rob gave you... I'm interested, actually, in your opinion of this one. Because
me too.
A lot of MMA fans hold this fight so dear. You know what I mean? It's like our little baby.
Yeah.
And we see it as an all-time classic. Now, obviously, you've seen the likes of Lawler, McDonald, and you've seen more recent evolution brawls and fights and technique and just incredible fights. So what was your opinion of potentially the fight that saved the UFC and Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin?
Absolutely brilliant fight, a cracker. The two guys for 3 rounds, and then there was almost if it was a draw, obviously it was going to a 4th round because it's a tough thing. But yeah, brilliant fight, really enjoyed it. And you really do get the sense with the commentary of Rogan on how good the fight was. They really sell it that way. So impressive, both of them.
What way did you score it? Because I know people who gave it to Griffin.
Really?
Bonner, sorry. Yeah. Griffin got it, yeah. But I know people that gave it to Bonner. Yes. I know 3 guys.
I gave it to Griffin, but I mean, an all-out war, like. Yeah. Bonner definitely deserved the contract as well. I liked that. Yeah.
And tell a story about how hard you found it to find on UFC Fight Pass.
Bonner, Stephan Bonner, I assume spelled his name with an F, but he doesn't. His name is actually Stephen. That's how his name should be pronounced. So Stephen Bonner wants to come at me and I'll tell him how to pronounce his name correctly.
So let's go with 5 championship rounds. The all-time classic that was Stephan Bonner. Forrest Griffin gets
5.
Wow.
It's kind of cool that it holds up because you don't know. You just don't know if it does. Yeah.
It's like when you're in the 90s and you're dancing the rhythm as a dancer, and you're giving it socks, and now you hear
kids like this.
Oh, shit song, wasn't it? Yeah. So it's still test of time.
That's awesome.
BJ Penn?
4.
4. Yeah,
I'd
I
take that one.
can't disagree.
Proper
I'd say,
bloodbath as well.
Yeah, it wasn't really that competitive. It was just like a beat down.
Yeah, I wanted
Blood.
to give it because BJ was fighting this week. He was on
Yeah,
6 fights, skilled.
Yeah, it would've made sense.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it made sense. So Rob,
Yes.
I know this is something that you put a lot of work into. Every week you'd be messaging me all during the week. Going,
Don't
gotta
give him
get
this
Sean
one.
the fight. Gotta get Sean a fight. Don't give him this. What have you got from this week?
Hopefully, I didn't give him this. We've gone with a lot of pride. Well, some pride, some UFC. Gonna go with Strike Force because I don't think we've given it a Strike Force fight. We're gonna go with what's the event? Strike Force. It's just called Diaz versus Daly, and that's your fight. It's Nick Diaz versus Paul Daly.
Oh, Paul Daly's been around a while then, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
It's a good fight.
Good fight,
Good to see a Diaz brother actually fighting
Yeah.
as well, you know. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen too often.
Yeah. You have to go back into
Yeah.
the past to see it.
Into
Great
the
stuff.
past. I was.
I were googling for a fight there.
Nah, yeah. I have to give a fight. Hold on. My fight is one of my all-time favorite fighters. I absolutely love this.
Carlos
man. No,
Weidman.
it's took place at Bellator 149. It's Dada 5000 against Kit. No, it's not.
I've seen that one.
Oh.
Jesus Christ.
This was UFC 140. The headlines, which isn't the fight, was John Jones against Machida. Co-main event is my pick. Robert, this is where I do be very impressed with you. So I will leave the floor to you for just a brief second. So the co-main event of John Jones, I can't even speak, Machida. Heavyweights.
I don't know. Frank Mir. Frank Mir.
Oh,
Frank
from
Mir.
the fire.
How does he do it?
Yeah.
Because I said one of my all-time
Nogueira.
favorites, and then I said
Nogueira.
favorite. Frank Mir,
Big nog.
Big Nog, 2.
I love that fight. I love that fight.
I'm a huge Frank Mir fan. Always have been. Absolutely love Frank Mir. He was meant to come on the show a while ago.
shit,
And
yeah.
it never happened. Still love him though. Yep. So Antonio Nogueira taking on Frank Mir 2 UFC 140.
Great stuff.
Oh, I remember rewinding that fight about 6 times watching it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
And you know with him, I found your essence now.
Yeah. You've
I
got
know
me.
You like it.
Oh, yeah.
You will. Yeah. So let's get weird. Let's get wonderful, and let's move on to Sean's weird and wonderful news. So Sean, what's weird and wonderful in the life of Sean Thala this week?
So first up, I have Bellator Birmingham was on recently,
Oh, yeah.
and we have a submission that you guys showed me on Educating Young Sean one week. Very
Oh.
rare.
I missed this fight.
So great stuff. Twitter.
Class
Well done.
Twitter. Yeah.
Oh.
Nick Diaz would be proud.
Hmm.
Tim Wilde is going to get it.
Oh, yeah. Class. Oh, we could have popped out there.
Mm.
Oh, we could have popped out there. What was he doing? Mush push. It's a go-go platter for anybody who's listening.
Yeah, people.
And he's punching him in the head. No.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Press the remote there.
Press that one, yeah. Go-go platter. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Our TV is
Very
about to
nice.
turn off.
TV at its finest.
Just press okay.
Where's okay? There's no okay
That's
on
why I
this.
gave it to you. That's wonderful. Brett Primus, was it?
Yeah.
Class.
So yeah,
Brent Primus.
Tim
Very-
Wilde. I think I introduced Tim Wilde on
Did you?
Bama.
very cool submission.
Yeah,
I
go-go
love a
platter.
go-go platter. You don't see that ever.
It's the
Need some flexibility.
it's the wham submission of MMA. Wake me up before I go platter.
Oh.
Here all week.
Go home.
Jose Shorty Torres, yeah, friend of the show. We had him on a couple of times.
Mhm.
Little good news story here. He helped out a couple of guys with wrestling and stuff just because he was in a similar position when he was younger where he couldn't do certain things. So now he's just helping out a couple of guys in the wrestling. That
Oh,
was
well
a nice
done.
story.
Very nice.
Jose Shorty Torres is one of the nicest
Yeah,
human beings
he's a gent.
you'll ever meet. I got to talk to him over in Jordan after his victory, and just the nicest guy in the world. And he just started telling us a little bit about the struggles and stuff like that he has and helping people out.
Yeah.
Really cool guy.
Mhm.
Insanely cool guy.
Quick one. Little Max Holloway on the left.
Yeah, actually, that's mad, isn't it?
Yeah. Looks like a little blessed.
Mini blessed.
Mini
Well,
blessed.
you could be getting Max in trouble here, Rob.
Yeah.
Next up, second last, we have Paulie Malignaggi, who I fucking can't stand.
I've seen this.
So, can we get sound on this one, Rob?
Yeah, hopefully this gives sound. I'm not sure now.
Yo, what do you think about this? Yeah, this guy right here.
He went into that bar there to watch the football. He's a big football fan because there was, I know he's American, but he's Italian descent. He's a big football fan.
Yeah.
So we went in there to watch one of the games. I actually seen his interview with the Schmo.
Oh, yeah.
The schmo.
This is the Schmo with the pro. Unbelievable, this guy. I love him. But yeah, Malignaggi said that after that interview that he was going to go back down to that bar and take a piss on that mural of McGregor. Let's just get over it, Paulie.
Yeah. On it.
It's just
Isn't he like a girl that you dumped and she's fucking
Yeah.
stalking you like fuck? Not that I've
Yeah.
dumped many girls ahead of me, but it's always the dumping.
it's what I've been told happens.
Yeah, it's what I've been told to get upset.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, get over it, man. You know.
It's a bit unclassy as well. Like, I'm all for the slagging and stuff, but
Yeah,
like going in
spitting on
pissing
it.
on
It's also
spitting
someone's
on stuff.
artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last up, Will Fleury, we had on the show as well.
Oh, not Will. Will's cool.
Yeah.
It's just the way I said that. Like.
Will Fleury fucking loves spuds. Yeah, this was on his Instagram story. Will, what's up? You love spuds.
Yeah, he loves a bit of spud, doesn't he?
Yeah.
What's that? That's this is
Fried
showy fried
eggs.
diet. Fried eggs and
Cottage cheese.
Cottage cheese. Yeah.
Yeah,
I fucking hate cottage
I
cheese.
love cottage
Oh, do you?
cheese. Yeah. Big
Oh.
fan
I
of
might
it,
start
yeah.
replying to all of Will's tweets and Insta stories with the hashtag Will Fleury loves spuds.
Yeah,
Will
spud
fucking
life.
Fleury, Spud life. That'll show you though. Like, Will is a big mofo of a man,
Yeah.
and that's his diet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I hate cottage cheese. My mate used to, when we were going to the gym, used to eat cottage cheese on the back of the bus
Nah,
like, with a spoon.
Nah, that's weird.
I know.
But you look at Will
Who are
Fleury.
you
he's-
friends with, Rob?
It's
I gotta give it to him, right? His eggs are cooked perfectly because
Yeah.
there's a little bit of dipping in the yolk there.
Yeah.
But the pro tip there, did you see the pro tip on the potatoes? He's doing the little crisscross so that they cook proper when you're cooking them. That's not Will Fleury's first time cooking a spud.
But definitely not.
I can tell you that.
About
for
12 of
certain.
them there. You've done at
Yeah.
least 12.
Well, no, Rob, I don't.
Yeah.
You don't cook them individually, mate. Put them on the pot.
Yeah. No. Oh, shit. Another tip.
But
You
yeah,
got it wrong.
Will
Yeah,
loves.
if you follow
loves
Will on social media as well, just reply to everything with Will Fleury loves spuds, please.
Yeah, please
Yeah.
do it.
wonderful
Yeah.
stuff. And what a way to end the show on Spud Life. Sean, you do bring weird and wonderful things, really, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Well, I try to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that jersey today. Weird and wonderful. Bit off.
What? Yeah, no, I thought the crest was there, but I fucked it.
Dundalk crest.
Top of the
Been a
league,
few
baby.
botches on this episode.
This has been episode 11. We'd like to thank Chuck Mindenhall for taking the time as always coming on. He's like a special guest co-host of this show at this stage. He used to be Jimmy Smith. Jimmy's left us
Although
since
I
he
love-
has his own
yeah.
podcast.
If you're a new listener to this and you didn't listen
Yeah.
to the previous incarnation of this podcast, you'll be like,
Yeah.
Chuck Mindenhall's never been on the show. What are you talking about?
Yeah. But hey, he has my
Yeah.
babies. See my little, we got somebody when I start on about my babies, we got a comment on YouTube of a fellow baby for the Crystalia podcast.
Ah, nice, yeah.
We'll get to that log cabin soon. But yeah, if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that bell so you get all notifications of all the future videos that come out. I've been Noel O'Keefe. He's been Robert Palin. That's young Shantella. Until 12. See you next week.
Spud life.
So apparently if you press this button somewhere here, it subscribes and you get all the notifications for the show. So hit that button there.
You have to click the bell, though, to get the notifications
Here.
down the bottom.
Make sure you hit it and they get the ringer things because Rob didn't know. So it's the button
Yeah.
there. Or there.
It's somewhere roughly around that area.